Riding along a dreary sunset, Yui Komori arrives at a large, secluded mansion surrounded by a forest. Walking towards it, a sudden intense rain and lightning began, so she hurried to take cover, knocking on the door, calling, and it suddenly opened without anybody on the other side. Entering in, she thought maybe the owners weren't informed that she was coming. She called out again.
Hello? Is anybody here?
But still no response, until she turned over, seeing a boy with red hair asleep on the couch. Touching him, his body was cold. She tried to check his breathing.
Doesn't have a pulse. Oh no! I have to call an ambulance right away.
Yui started reaching for her phone with a franticness, only for Ayato to suddenly grab it, getting irritated over being woken up. She was shocked because she swore his heart wasn't beating. She got up, only to get quickly pulled down onto the couch, Ayato telling her she should already know the answer. He was about to take her, but before he could take a bite, his older, more aloof brother, Reiji, interrupted. Reiji reminded him this was the entrance hall, a place meant to greet guests, and that he should take any activities to a private room. Yui tried to go to Reiji for help, explaining her father sent her to live here. Reiji knew nothing about this, asking Ayato, who also had no clue. Ayato even blamed Pancake, referring to Yui being as flat as a pancake, for not explaining herself earlier. Still pondering the matter, Reiji had their butler, who suddenly appeared out of nowhere, take Yui's luggage. Reiji wanted her to explain her story, but then Laito, their brother, interjected, giggling over the cute human girl. He then suddenly appeared at Yui's side, jump-scaring her with a lick on the cheek, and the next brother, Kanato, desired to taste as well, remarking her to be sweet. Reiji scolded his younger brothers for being impolite towards a lady they had just met, with Laito and Kanato quipping back that something that looks sweet should be tasted. Ayato then got irritated, telling them, "Yours truly," referring to himself, was going to be her first everything. The next brother, Subaru, was sick of Ayato referring to himself with egotistical importance. He was irritated that the commotion Yui caused also interrupted his sleep. Yui wondered how he suddenly appeared out of nowhere, pissing Subaru off into crushing the wall, as he demanded she answer his question first. Yui thought perhaps this was all some misunderstanding and tried to take her leave. However, Reiji stopped her since he was trying to verify the truth of the matter. That's when the eldest brother, Shuu, casually answered that he might know something. Some guy had contacted him the other day, saying they'd have a guest arriving from the church, and to treat her with respect. Also, to not kill her because she was their prospective bride. Now discovering her purpose here, that's when Reiji introduced the brothers from oldest to youngest being Subaru. Yui was at a loss though, since she heard nothing about brides. And besides, these guys were all kind of strange to her. She wanted to contact her father, but Ayato had her phone, which quickly got crushed by Subaru. Subaru wanted her to get lost. However, the rest of the brothers had no intention of letting her leave, with Laito whispering to bitch that she smelled so delicious. She screamed, falling over, and seeing how the bloody scrape of her knee lit the vampire boys up, she held out her cross for protection. Shuu smirked, while Reiji explained a fairy tale written by a mortal claiming vampires were weak to garlic, holy crosses, and sunshine to be a ridiculous notion. Seeing them unfazed, Yui then ran out. Trying to escape, she came across Kanato, who said he would break her. Then going for the phone that had its cord cut, Laito was right behind her, and reaching the entrance door that wouldn't budge. Ayato had been anticipating her time to scream. She shoved him off, getting away as he laughed, heading upstairs and reaching a room that previously had a lock on it, which was broken. Inside, she found slight reprieve, seeing none of the vampire boys in sight. She walked towards the window, and seeing a woman with purple hair turn towards her, Yui's heart started hurting for some reason. She backed into a shelf, knocking some books down. Then glancing at the window again, the woman was nowhere to be seen. She then spotted a notebook, which contained a photo of her being held by her father. It was his diary. It read, "Yui gives me happiness. The fact that she is not actually my child means nothing now. I am only grateful for this blessing every day I live.
So what does this mean? Is it true that I'm not my father's daughter? What is my father's diary doing here anyway?
But hearing the brothers annoyed, she just had to enter this room. She gasped, seeing all of them appear without her having noticed. This room was sealed off so no one could enter, so now they'd have to fit it with a new lock. The brothers were just as perplexed as how she got in here. They then surrounded her, with Reiji explaining there was one fact for certain she needed to comprehend. She could never escape from them. Ayato then pinned her down, and seeing him bare his fangs, all Yui could do was pray to God. Just like how I'm praying for you to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Here at My Shoujo Weekly, I've got plenty of spicy vampire stories to share with you. I even have a whole playlist you can check out. So come on, join for the tea, subscribe to me. The next day, Yui wakes up, relieved to find out she hasn't been bitten. But wait, she didn't remember changing clothes? With yesterday's events quickly flashing through her mind, she wondered how this all happened. She needed to contact her father, and was still unsure of why he'd send her here. However, Laito, who suddenly appeared on her bed, told her crying was useless. He remarked her to be quite sexy in negligee, and with her delicious smell, questioned if she was coming on to him. But then, Ayato shoved him away since he already claimed Yui as his property. Reiji then told them to stop playing around, otherwise they'd be late for school. They attended school at night, here in the Sakamaki residence. Despite her worries about the late time, Reiji told her she'd have to adjust to their schedule. He then told her to hurry up and get changed into her uniform, and in a flash, the boys were gone. Looking at her rosary, she thought maybe this was her chance to get back into the room where she found the journal. Opening the door, Ayato was waiting right outside, reminding her she needed to change. On the way to school, Yui and the brothers were escorted via a limousine. She wondered if they got along, considering they didn't seem to really talk to each other at all. Ayato and Yui started arguing about her pancake nickname, and he decided he wanted a bite. However, Reiji reminded him any feeding should always be done privately in his room. Reiji then offered 100% cranberry juice to Yui. This was not a friendly gift, because he wanted her to be fully aware that she was their prey that needed to drink it daily to improve her blood potency. Holding the juice, she shook in fear. At school, Reiji informed Yui she was in the same class as Ayato and Kanato, and to not misbehave, unless she wanted a whipping. She complied with her place. Walking into the classroom, she learned it was food prep in the home economics class. Ayato pulled her away, skipping class so they could go make takoyaki together. He enjoyed the hot takoyaki, and she enjoyed some as well. Then she decided to clean up, so she could get to her next class. She asked Ayato for help, but when he appeared behind her, she ran away. He wanted her blood. Grabbing her face, he thought her skin looked delicious without any fang marks. He bit in, astonished at how delicious her blood really was. Sweeter than anything he's ever tasted. He just had to drink more.
Stop it! Let me go!
Yui pulled away, but Ayato enjoyed seeing her tears and the look of pain on her face. He shoved her down, continuing to feast, but that's when Reiji appeared, calling him a disgrace for doing this at school. With Reiji taking his leave, he told his brother to make sure Yui got home safely. Later, she woke up, scurrying away, telling him to stay back. He wanted to make her position clear though, so he picked her up, carrying her towards the pool, telling her she was at his mercy, and tossed her in, tired of her complaining. He wanted her to tell him he was the best, better than anyone, and that she belonged to him. She struggled calling for him though, because she couldn't swim. This gave Ayato flashbacks to when he was a child drowning in the water, reaching out for his mother. He decided to dive in after her, and breathe in oxygen through a kiss. He then went for a bite next. Blood flowing in the water, he lifted her up. He was overflowing from drinking. She begged to make it all stop, so Ayato took her out of the water and put a towel over her as he walked away. Back at the mansion, she snuck into the room where she had found her father's diary. Picking it up again, she was shocked to see all the pages were empty. As the family is having dinner, Yui looks around at each of the brothers. Laito gets up in an attempt to feed her, but of course, Reiji scolds him because it's bad manners to get up during their meal. Shuu then gets up and leaves, thinking this entire interaction to be annoying. However, Reiji is just as irritated at Shuu, remarking him to have lived both privileged and spoiled. Reiji calls an end to their dinner, but not before telling Yui she has terrible table manners. Yui sits in her bedroom, sighing, then reaches out for her father's diary, which is still blank. Her photo with him is the only clue she had. Ayato then suddenly appeared, startling her. He wanted to drink. Yui tried to make an excuse to leave for a bath, and also, she'd been feeling quite faint lately. But that was never going to stop Ayato from drinking, even leaving what he called a stamp mark on her body. He wanted to leave her with more marks and make her feel more pain, but decided to stop as he didn't want to deal with her fainting before she had her bath. Inside the bathroom, she checked the marks on her skin. Then suddenly, she heard the sound of someone in the bathtub, and it was Shuu, fully clothed with his headphones still in, by the way. She wondered why he was still dressed, to which he suggested she undress him then, teasing that she might want to see him naked. She denied these claims, somewhat embarrassed, telling him she just came in here for a bath. She wondered why, with the boys all being brothers, they had such vastly different personalities. Shuu then explained the family tree. He and Reiji had the same mother. Ayato, Kanato, and Laito were triplets from another mother, and Subaru from another mother as well. Shuu then began sinking into the bath, so Yui reached out for him. This gave him flashbacks of another time in the past, where as a young boy, everything had been set ablaze. He snapped out of his trance to see he was hurting Yui, but instead of letting go, he pulled her right into the bath with him. He wanted her blood. He pulled her in closer, remarking her skin to be so pale, he'd bet a single bite would spurt bright red blood like a geyser. Seeing the marks, he called Ayato a possessive freak. Sitting frightened, Yui squeaked,
I thought you were different, Shuu. Why?
However, he wanted there to be no misconceptions. He was a vampire, just like the rest of his brothers. And taking his bite, he was determined to show her a whole new world. He felt her blood was hot, so hot he could burn, like she was getting excited. Her temperature was rising now that his fangs were at her throat. Pulling away, he told her to think twice before she decided to reach out to him again. Back in her room, Yui believed she'd get a moment of reprieve, but with Ayato having waited, he wasn't going to let her refuse. While going for his bite though, he noticed marks from Shuu, so he went downstairs to pick a fight with the older brother. Ayato challenged Shuu to a game of darts, but Shuu refused because it was too much trouble. That's when Laito began clapping, saying the winner of the game could have Yui. Reiji then made his entrance, believing there was no way, since Shuu always shrunk back from any challenge. Even saying if you look up spineless in the dictionary, you'd find a photo of him beside it. Man, Reiji really got beef with Shuu. This was enough to get Shuu up for the game, and now he only needed one more shot on point to win. He lands it with ease, taking his victory. He ends up just walking past her, so Laito shoves her into him, where he tells her mortals are just prey for him to feed on. At school one day, Yui had finally found a phone she could use to reach out to someone, but quickly stopped to see that Kanato was watching her. He had been waiting around for her because he was thirsty, and so was Teddy? Yui apologized to Teddy, but Freak Boy told her not to address his Teddy as if she knew him. I'ma say it now, I like Kanato the least. Yui was nice enough to come back with coffee, but Kanato slapped it out of her hand, shouting he preferred things that were sweet and hated bitter things. Like she should have already known that? She tried to object to him throwing it on the floor, but he just shouted back saying not to talk back, that she was worthless and had no right. She then apologized, and he went on further, saying she shouldn't apologize if she wasn't sorry. He then quickly shifted to a softer tone, worried if the coffee splashed on her fingers. Pitying her, he licked her hand, making her pull back, and walking away, he told her to make the effort to understand him. Looking around, she asked Kanato if he'd seen her bag, only to learn he put it on the roof to punish her. Leaving, he has one final word with Teddy, telling the little bear the phone she was trying to use had been broken for 2 weeks now, so there was no point in her trying to use it. Grabbing her bag, Yui overhears Laito on the roof talking to himself. I love you, forever and ever and ever. Whether you desire it or not, I have never forgotten you, even for an instant. I remember your voice, your scent, your everything. Hey, who goes there? Yui tries to hide, but with her eavesdropping on Laito, he thinks she needs a little punishment. He shoves her against the wall, asking where she'd like it, perhaps in the place she was most sensitive. He had a small taste of her neck and was getting excited to drink. Having a taste, he pulled out, wondering what this familiar feeling was. Giving her the opportunity to shove him off and get away, she ran to a telephone booth, dialing her father's phone number, but on the other line was Laito. She turned her head, staring across the street, to see him holding a cell phone, and seeing his glance, she knew all hope was lost. She tried to run away, only to bump into him, and he wasn't going to let his prey go. He then stopped, hearing the politician Togo Sakamaki over the news, about to discuss Japan's new strategic foreign policy. This man was their father, although Laito hated him. Yui for some reason uttered his real name, Karl Heinz, and then passed out, making Laito question who she was. Yui later woke up in her bedroom. She snuck out of her house, noticing the door wasn't locked. Inside of the cathedral, she prayed for help.
Dear God, is this another ordeal you have seen fit to give me? Is my father alive and well?
Laito suddenly appeared, telling her God would never answer. He'd been watching her the entire time, and told her she should really stop running. With him grabbing onto her, she begged and screamed for help, asking God for help once again as she shoved him away. He just laughed and told her not to waste her breath praying, because God was nothing more than nonsense created by men. But even so, she held on to her faith. This only made him laugh further, calling her both stupid and naive. He found her innocence appealing, but still, he believed there was nothing to believe in, and that one needed to do more than just pray to accomplish anything. Shoving Yui down, he now sought to expose the lust inside of her. She was angry at him for trying to do something like this inside of a church, but he had no plans of stopping. He had inhuman strength and was willing to force her submission. He planned to make her his. First, he bit on her thigh until the blood dripped down his face. He then exposed a horrible secret. The very church she had faith in was who had sent her here. She tried to deny it, only being reminded they were the ones who dropped her off here, tears dripping down her face as he went for another bite. The next day, with Yui tending to the rose garden, she tried to deny Laito's words about her being sold off by the church. Kanato then suddenly appeared, leading her to somewhere he demanded she be, and at his mother's gravesite, he began monologuing about the dark and deathly smells of graves he loved so much, especially the cold quietness that was indifferent to terror. Yui was surprised to hear Kanato was the one who killed his mother, but as he requested, she placed flowers down at her grave and quickly attempted to leave. This pissed Kanato off. Thinking of her to be quite self-serving, he was upset for especially inviting her out here, but now she was trying to leave immediately, having placed her flowers down. He started furiously thrashing the flowers against his mother's grave, and stepping towards Yui, he was combative, causing her to trip, which made him laugh. He enjoyed her pathetic look, wanting her to crawl around the dirt and cry, so that he may forgive her. But jumping on top of her, he was ready to eat. He noticed her shuddering back, wondering if mortal women got angry for not being kissed before pleasure. He thought it to be a pain, but decided to give her a kiss, then go for a drink. He noticed she smelled quite familiar, but still, he needed more and more blood. After dragging her way out from her ordeal, Subaru asked what his uncle Richter was doing here. Richter then vanished in a gust of wind, telling Subaru the awakening would manifest soon. Subaru didn't understand though. Heading to her room, Yui overheard strange noises coming next door. She peeped inside the room to see Reiji was struggling in his sleep, and touching him, he couldn't believe he was actually woken up by the smell of her blood. She apologized, but he admitted waking up this way was preferable to the nightmare he was having. He got up to make them tea, and before Yui could even finish her next sentence, Reiji immediately told her to stop being conceited, because he definitely wasn't going to make any for her, and instead just allowed her to enjoy the aroma. It got awkwardly silent before she shifted the conversation to talking about his room. She wondered if anyone else used the room, like Shuu, but hearing his older brother's name really pissed Reiji off. He wouldn't elaborate on why he hated Shuu, but remembered sadly staring out the window seeing all the attention Shuu had gotten from their mother. Reiji had a change of heart, deciding to share his tea with Yui. Taking one drink though, she instantly dropped her glass, with her body becoming numb. He then remedied it by shoving another concoction in her, but getting off of the floor, her hand had taken some serious wounds. Having a taste from her hand, Reiji wondered what the familiar sensation was. Yui standing up, she could see the glare from his eyes, that he was ready to feed. He shoved her against the wall. She pleaded,
Reiji, please don't.
but there's no one here who would hear her scream. For him, mortals were nothing but containers of blood. But despite Yui's position as a worthless container, he wanted to give her more pleasure than anyone. While he drank from her, she shoved him off. Getting annoyed, he threatened to bind her bloody hand so tightly it would eventually rot and fall off of her wrist. He reveled in the idea that she would die in despair. But remembering when he had killed his mother, she died with a smile. He hated that his mother was allowed such a peaceful death. He wouldn't allow Yui to do the same. On another day, Yui found Kanato singing a dreary song on a ledge. She wanted him to get off because she felt it was dangerous. Kanato giggled, noting her expression of anxiety mingled with fear. He thought it was cute, but also hated her making that face. He believed her worries to be too conceited. He promised to get down, relieving Yui. So he did get down, but not the way she had wanted, hearing a loud thud when he hit the ground. At the bottom, she kept calling his name, worried for him, but a tiny fall was never going to harm an immortal vampire. He wished he could die that easily. Getting up, Kanato wanted to take Yui to a place where he was fond of. They went into a room full of eerie wax figures. Some useless dialogue happens where he scares her, saying he'd make her as lifeless as one of these figures. Then he ends up getting her against a wall before going for a bite. We then learn the horrifying truth, that each of these wax dolls were once sacrificial brides, and with Kanato gripping onto Yui's neck, he was prepared to make her the next one. Until Ayato comes in, to tell Kanato Reiji needed him for something. Ayato didn't come to save her though, however, he was too tired to feed. Inside the house, Subaru warned her she would die if she stayed living here. He told her this was her chance to escape, so she went to her room and began packing up. Seeing the photo under the diary though, she stopped. She decided to stay because she wanted to learn the truth. She went to Subaru, asking if he knew anything about her father. Seeing her looking down, Subaru was reminded of his mother's saddened look. He handed her a silver knife, explaining it could be used to kill vampires as long as it was driven into the heart. He wouldn't elaborate why he gave it to her, only remembering his mother constantly telling him to murder someone. Coming back to her room, Laito was waiting for her. He spotted Subaru's knife and pulled it into his own heart. She didn't understand, so he explained that to a vampire, murder is the ultimate way to confess love, because it was wielding the finality that could end the life of an immortal. Shoving her against the wall, he wondered if she could comprehend what it was like to love someone so much to the point of hating them. He wanted to ridicule her, scream that she wanted him, admit that there was no God. Regardless, even being at his mercy, she chose to believe in her faith, no matter how painful life became. Laito pulled away and laughed, admiring her spunk. He used to only be interested in her blood, but now he wanted more than that. Yui woke up to a dark and stormy rain. Peeping outside of the window, she saw the mysterious woman with purple hair once again, and when the woman turned and smirked at her, Yui's body pulsated and she fell to the ground. She wandered into an underground area in a trance-like state, and when she finally became aware of where she was, she heard the sound of little boys giggling. A young Kanato was crying over the bats he just caught getting away. His twin brothers Laito and Ayato assured him they'd get them back, and that's when their mother, Cordelia, came in scolding young Ayato. Yui figured this was the same woman she saw in the garden earlier. Cordelia wanted Ayato to go back inside the house to study, despite him being frustrated from studying non-stop all the time. He wondered why Laito and Kanato were allowed to play outside while he couldn't. Cordelia became furious.
How many times must I tell you? You are the successor. Now, tell me what you must do.
Ayato's expression became saddened as he accepted her desire for him to become number one, throwing away any fun to become better than anyone. And if he were to fail, he wouldn't be his mother's child anymore. Punishment to be sunken at the bottom of the lake.
Exactly. Good boy. You are worthless to me unless you are number one. Worthless boys must spend eternity at the cold, damp bottom of the lake, all alone, where no one can help. So unless that's what you want, go to your room.
After Ayato ran off, Kanato, her little songbird, and Laito, her beloved pianist, would come to her side. Yui turned to see a young Reiji studying by his and Shu's mother, Beatrix. Shuu came in, joyously presenting a puppy. His mother was not pleased, though, reminding him he was the eldest son, and therefore the next head of the family. He was required to learn how to conduct himself at all times. She had the butler take the puppy away, so he ran off upset. Seeing what took place, Reiji tried to seek praise, letting his mother know he finished memorizing a part of the book he was reading, but she did not acknowledge him. Stepping forward, Yui noticed a white rose at her foot side, and picking it up, the thorns cut her finger. She found herself by beds of white roses on a high bridge walkway. Walking forward, she saw Subaru staring up at his mother, Krista, who was locked away in the tower. Elsewhere, Yui witnessed the boy's uncle, Richter, complimenting Cordelia on being the most beautiful and elegant. She flirted back, telling him to always remain by her side and whisper sweet nothings, something Ayato wasn't too happy to witness. Then all of a sudden, everything froze and became black and white around Yui, except Cordelia turned to look at her, causing Yui's heart to strain and her to collapse. She came to, with Ayato waking her up in the underground waterway. She asked what was behind the door near them, but he refused to answer. Instead, focusing on the cut on her finger she received from the white rose, Laito then appeared next, smelling the sweet scent of the blood, and with Ayato also ready to eat, Yui tried to head for the gate, but it was locked. She had no choice but to submit to having her blood sucked. She felt her chest starting to hurt again, and Ayato pulled away. That's when Laito came in, going for his bite as well. Shortly though, Ayato got frustrated and bored, deciding to leave. Observing the rose garden in the middle of the night, Yui heard the sound of the piano playing. She went upstairs to see the pleasant sounds coming from none other than Laito, who was glad she could hear his talents. Ignoring his usual playful banter, she asked him who the woman with purple hair was. Laito grew silent, even stopping his playing. Then suddenly, the rest of the triplets, Kanato and Ayato, appeared asking what she was doing here. Yui then asked them what happened to their mother. So, Ayato told the tale. On the night of a red moon, Cordelia screamed, panting. He remarked her blood on his clothing to be quite a shame. It was his favorite shirt, but still, the taste of it was incredibly sweet. With him wanting more of her blood, she ran in fear. She made it to where Laito was playing piano and commanded him to save her. He agreed, and taking her somewhere else, she was happy that Laito had driven Ayato away from her. She told Laito she loved him, but wasn't expecting him to shove her off the ledge, where her body was pierced amongst the roses. For him, her love was eternal now that he ended her. Seeing her bloodied body and hole in her chest, Kanato asked his mother what was wrong. He asked her to wake up and where her heart was, but now realizing she was cold and dead, he caressed her and decided to warm her up with the flames of his candles. He laughed at the sight of the fire warming her corpse. After hearing the events, Yui ran outside, tripping. She hated this place. Subaru reminded her she was the one who chose to remain here when she had a chance to run. Even knowing what the triplets did to their mother, Subaru did not care. She then reached up to him, asking Subaru why he gave her the knife, making him lash out. He didn't want her getting one step closer. She then remembered the vision of Subaru as a child, and asked about his mother in the tower. Hearing this prompted Subaru to grab her arm, asking what she expected from someone as powerless, hideous, and polluted as himself. He then pulled her in, gently holding her, before going for a bite on her neck. The blood was so sweet, he wanted more, biting another part and holding her close. Under his breath, he explained that the reason he gave her the knife was so that she could stab him with it, should she wish. She didn't want to do that, so he told her she could also use it to end herself. Morning came and Yui laid in bed thinking of Subaru's words. Feeling her bed move, she noticed Ayato was lying beside her. He told her not to look at him and quickly pulled her down, before closing his eyes to rest. Hearing the voice of a man calling out to Cordelia, Yui suddenly woke up. She shuddered, while her chest was hurting and heart beating so quickly. Later, she took a walk outside, and stopping by a building, bats flew at and swarmed her, until Shuu commanded for quietness. He asked what she wanted, so she explained that lately, she could hear the voice of a woman who wasn't there, and it made her feel unsteady. She didn't feel like herself lately. Shuu mocked her a little, pushing her down and going for a bite at her neck. Taking deep drinks, he noticed her blood was different. He could tell the awakening was at hand. Wiping it from her neck, he commented that it was hot and bursting out now. She tried to push him off, but her neck wasn't the only place supplied with blood. Fresh, new blood also flowed through her wrists, and it smelt good to him, so he took a bite. He loved the look of fear in her eyes as he went for more. Her blood was more delicious than anyone's. It slaked his every thirst. Yui didn't know what he meant by awakening, so she asked him to explain it. Shuu then got up, since he knew Richter was here, and asked him to explain instead. She remembered Richter being in love with Cordelia. After Shuu took his leave, Richter apologized for the rudeness of his nephews and offered to explain anything she wished to know. She asked why she came here, why she was chosen, and how her father was involved with sacrificial brides. Richter smirked at what he called conceitedness, at the idea that she'd been chosen. She was brought to their house because she was of suitable bridal age and was the easiest mortal to obtain. This didn't even involve her father in any way. And finally, she learned something that relieved some weight off of her mind. Then suddenly, her chest ached again, making her fall. Richter was happy to finally see his beloved Cordelia. He'd been waiting a long time for this moment, and telling her it was time to go, Yui entered a trance-like state. In the sealed room, Richter turned the diary and baby photo of Yui to sand, as he no longer needed these tools to keep her here. He then prompted Yui to enter a room behind the secret bookcase, where inside was the enshrined Cordelia's bloody dress, and with Yui touching it, blood drenched her hand, and she gasped. Seeing Cordelia reaching towards her, Yui turned around and smirked, saying,
"We finally meet again, Richter."
Richter then gracefully bowed, hearing his beloved Cordelia had finally returned. Staring at her hand, she laughed with great wickedness. The brothers, one by one, were sensing something had happened. Ayato ran to Yui's room, finding she had left the cross behind on her bed. In one of the balcony areas, Cordelia and Richter were reminiscing about the good old days, where they would dance the night away. Richter did feel some sadness that she was his sister-in-law. He had fought his brother over her and lost. In an effort to forget her, he wandered the world for hundreds of years. She told him there was no need to forget her, though, and that he owed Karl Heinz nothing. She wanted him to let it go. It was all in the past, and besides, she was resurrected now. Ayato then showed up, asking what the deal was. It was clear he wasn't pleased to see his mother again, especially inside of Yui's body. Cordelia wasn't in the mood to explain, though, feeling a little tired and not fully used to her new body. She could even sense Yui trying to reject her, but didn't seem too worried about it as she walked right by Ayato. With Ayato asking how this happened, Richter explained. The night she was murdered, he came to her aid. She knew her body was done for and asked him to cut her heart out, to implant it into another body. That was the only way he could keep her alive. She begged him to do it quickly, knowing Kanato would be coming soon to incinerate her. So, pointing his sword at her, as the rain continued to fall, he took her heart right out and swore he'd resurrect her, wishing her a farewell for the moment. The heart inside Yui is Cordelia's. Yui is merely a vessel, and once Cordelia fully awakens, Yui's soul will be obliterated for all eternity. Ayato was not excited to hear this. He went over to where Cordelia was staring at the lake. She giggled, turning towards him asking if he would kill her again. He reminded her he used to be a bad swimmer, so she took all the credit on his improvement. He threatened to push her in, but she laughed, because she herself was an excellent swimmer, and not understanding until inside of the water, Yui's body had no idea how to swim. With Ayato about to walk away, Yui called out to him, choking from the near drowning. She asked how she got in the lake, and why she was in this dress. But instead of explaining, Ayato got right to drinking her blood, because he was unbelievably parched. He was shocked at how filling his meal was right now. He needed it so much more. Drinking her blood as it was now, he'd never want anyone else's. He told her she belonged to him, her blood, her heart, her body, her soul. He wanted her to devote her blood and life to him. Before he could continue though, Laito and Kanato were here to interrupt him. With her having nearly awakened, her blood had such a strong, sweet scent they just couldn't resist. Yui took this opportunity to run away because Ayato decided to be greedy, not wanting his brothers to take what was his. She kept running, making it inside of her room. When she pulled out the dagger from her drawer, Subaru pulled her close because of her incredible smell. Drinking from her shoulder, he remarked it to be so good, he wanted to make her feel his fangs. Her blood was irresistible. Yui fell from the continual blood loss. She didn't want to keep the dagger, not knowing what she would do with it, but Subaru left it by her side. Richter explained her blood was driving the boys mad. Their behavior was out of the ordinary because of her near awakening, and each of them would become frantic to make her theirs alone, and it may even lead the brothers to kill each other. She wondered what she should do, so we told her to clear her mind, and the answer would come. She need only accept what would come as if it were her destiny. The window suddenly burst open, and seeing Cordelia outside turn towards her, Yui's chest pulsated. She began walking forward at Cordelia's command, and falling into prayer, the awakening brought Cordelia full control of Yui's body. Cordelia and Richter were laughing as she enjoyed drinks on a couch. Reiji then appeared, never imagining she would have returned. Cordelia only wished he wasn't so stiff, however, because he looked the most like Karl Heinz back when she first met him. She didn't want him to be so standoffish, prompting him to come towards her, and walking up, he remembered her scheming to be as natural as her breathing. That fact was no bother to Cordelia. She wanted to stay vibrant as long as she lived. What she despised the most was boredom. Boredom was the most painful thing an immortal could endure. Reiji agreed, responding boredom didn't suit her, because death suited her much better. She took that as a compliment, however, offering him a seat, wanting to talk face to face. He didn't budge, making her question if he was defensive. In that respect, he reminded her of his mother, Beatrix. She was a woman who suppressed her emotions and hid how she felt, but ultimately met a useless, pathetic end. Seeing this struck a nerve with Reiji. She went on further that Beatrix didn't seem to love him as much as she loved Shuu. She thought he wouldn't mind her slandering his mother. Reiji understood this is how Cordelia manipulated his father and uncle against each other. Cordelia accepted that she was the reason Karl and Richter's once friendly relationship had deteriorated, but in truth, their bond must not have been that strong in the first place. Enjoying how observant Reiji was, Cordelia walked towards him, taking off his glasses to see the eyes that reminded her of Karl's. Caressing his face, she explained she came back to life to take revenge on his father and make him pay with death. Reiji wondered if it was revenge for his father not loving her. However, she responded that her desire to kill him was the greatest proof of her love. He told her she was just pushing her love on him, which annoyed her, so she decided to silence his mouth with a kiss. She went for more, and he even held her in, but wanted Cordelia to stop toying with him. He asked what about his uncle. However, Cordelia told him Richter could not object to whatever she wanted, and with her wanting to continue the kissing session, Reiji rejected her, claiming he wasn't attracted to corrupt women with loose morals. So, she slapped him across the face. Laito then came in, casually telling them to stop fighting since they were all family. The two bantered because he thought the next time he'd see his mother was in hell, and she apologetically teased that she was sorry for not living up to his expectations. With Kanato walking in, Cordelia told her little songbird to sing with his beautiful voice for her like he used to. However, he was more concerned as to how she returned to life. Subaru was angry though, telling both Richter and Cordelia to leave because they didn't belong here. Richter clapped back, saying Subaru put on a good show, despite his inability to protect his own mother, really pissing Subaru off enough to jump up and try to punch his uncle. However, Richter easily staved off Subaru's attacks. It was clear that Richter was much stronger than all of them. However, Shuu got up, remarking Richter was much weaker compared to their father, not even able to rival himself with Karl Heinz. Cordelia was getting annoyed with the boys, saying the worst thing about them was they wouldn't allow her to be herself. She commanded Richter to dispose of them using Subaru's knife, knowing a single stab into a vampire's heart would cause them to disintegrate. She promised if Richter killed them now, she'd make him the next head of the family. However, he thought that to be strange, since she already agreed to make him the head for just saving her life. She tried curling up to him, reiterating she'd put him on the throne and to hurry up and dispose of the boys. This is when he decided to truly make her aware of how things really were. She was useless to him in her less than pristine condition. All he needed was her heart, As long as he awakened the girl who had her heart and made her his, he could become the next head of the family without her help. This made her nervously step back, questioning if he had planned this from the start. But how did she only realize that now it was not her using him? He was the one using her. He pulled her in, ready for a meal. However, Ayato interrupted because he wasn't going to let anyone have his property. Richter quickly pulled out a sword and went for a slash that Ayato dodged. So Laito tossed Ayato a sword, and the two men began their slashing duel for the prize of Yui's body. Ayato was at a clear disadvantage, receiving the blade right into his shoulder and falling to his knees. Richter then braced for a final swing, but that's when Yui called for Ayato, and with Richter distracted seeing Yui was back, she quickly grabbed the silver dagger from him and got away. Shaking, holding the dagger in front of herself, she pointed it towards her chest, wanting no one else to get hurt from her actions. As she plunged the blade directly into her heart, Richter still desired to claim her, but Ayato caught his uncle off guard with a stab. Yui's body began to move, but it was Cordelia in control. Yui stabbing her own body was useless, as her death and Cordelia's awakening was inevitable. Lying bloody and asleep in Ayato's arms, Laito could hardly believe Yui had the guts to stab her own heart. The boys wondered what was going to happen next, so Subaru pulled the dagger out of her heart. Panting and bleeding out, Richter made his way through the underground waterway. He refused to die before completing his goal. Back where the boys were, they noticed Yui getting paler by the second, while Reiji was trying to figure out how to get Cordelia out of her. Richter made it to where Cordelia's dress was, reaching for the white flower. However, Laito had been following the entire time. He now understood why Richter kept coming to their house, since this dress was the key to overthrowing their father. Back at the house, Reiji presented a concoction to remove Cordelia. It just needed Cordelia's blood, which Kanato conveniently had hidden within Teddy. So mixing it with his potion, it was now ready for use. Returning to where Richter was, Laito presented a special lantern, one that he used to burn the dress and the entire room down before taking his leave. Ayato passed the potion through Yui using mouth to mouth, and when she woke up, she was back to normal. Seeing the brothers all before her though, she was a little thirsty. Later that evening, Ayato handed her rosary back, and with that, the room that held Cordelia's memories was sealed once again. Ghostly wolves prowled the night under the moonlight, under the command of two brothers enacting their vengeance for their desire to become the founders of the vampires. You find Yui sleeping in a strange, empty place upon a tree, only hearing the call, Eve, to awaken. Yui got up to see the flowers bloom on the tree branches, but couldn't understand who this voice was that kept calling out to her. Just a dream though, and the triplets were in her bed watching over her, commenting on how she was so melodramatic in her sleep. They were all thirsty for a drink, and even though Ayato was trying to be greedy by hogging all of her blood to himself, Laito interjected that her blood was for everybody, so they all got to eating at once. Except Reiji stopped them for school, calling the indecent act so early in the day a disgrace. Laito suggested that he join in, making Subaru call him a pervert. Shuu told them all to shut up, so he could enjoy his music. Ayato still wanted a drink, making Reiji scold him, while Kanato wouldn't stop talking to Teddy. It was just another day for the brothers and Yui, until their limo suddenly flipped over and exploded into a tree. They all emerged out just fine, and now trying to figure out who was trying to assassinate them. Perhaps it was the four shadowy figures standing above them. Ayato wanted to know who they were, but instead of answering, one of the boys responded, Eve, with a voice Yui recognized, before they disappeared. The brothers didn't like the smell of the four shadowy boys. They were indeed vampires, but not purebloods like the brothers were. Ayato was getting fired up over a potential declaration of war. Later that night, Yui wandered about because she couldn't sleep. Still fixated on what happened earlier, a voice suddenly called out to her as Eve again, making her turn and look around, but she couldn't see anyone. A blonde-headed boy then appeared behind saying, "Found you." Then she suddenly found herself surrounded by two more boys, so she tried to run back home, getting stopped because Ruki, Mukami, and his brothers had come for her. Inside this strange, empty room, Yui lies asleep. A deep voice tells her all will be made clear in the course of nature. As a hand reaches towards her, She wakes up suddenly in an extravagant home, but not one familiar to her. Ruki thinks she sleeps quite peacefully for being livestock. Yui tries to ask why she was brought here, and that's when Yuma slams the wall, telling her to shut up and stop her squealing. Then, Ko comes down playfully saying, and now, she was brought here so suddenly. Of course she'd be confused. And finally, the last brother, Azusa, speaking so slowly as if impaired, asks her if she likes pain, causing her to fall back onto the couch. The Mukami brothers introduce themselves and tell Yui she's going to be living here from now on. She didn't want this, so she tried to run away, but Ruki stopped her, reminding Yui she was kept as a plaything at the Sakamaki household. With franticness, she argues,
But you're all vampires too, aren't you? So it'd be the same if I stayed here.
Ruki didn't appreciate him and his brothers being compared to the Sakamakis. He believed they had more sense. Regardless of her being convinced or not, they needed her. No, they needed Eve's blood. Yui was flabbergasted. How could she be Eve? But as long as she possessed Eve's blood, the brothers knew she was destined to find Adam. Living with the Mukami brothers now, her opinion didn't matter. As long as she was Eve, she was to obey their rules. Back at the Sakamaki residence, Ayato was frustrated he couldn't find Pancake anywhere. The brothers all wondered where she had run off to. However, Shuu told them to leave her be because he felt she'd return eventually. In her new room, Yui stared up at the moon and sighed. She heard a click at her door and realized it was unlocked, so she ran downstairs and through the halls hoping to find a way to escape, but she couldn't find any way to get out. Then, the ringing of a large bell, the apples, and the empty room rang through her mind. She looked up, seeing Ruki had found her. He tossed her into her room, calling her ill-behaved livestock for trying to escape. So now, she'd be sleeping in his room tonight. He wouldn't stop her if she tried to escape, but only punishment would await if she did. Yui accepted her place, and seeing an old photo of Ruki's, he put it down. He walked towards her, telling her he was surprised a mediocre woman such as herself really contained the blood of Eve. However, he had to drink her blood for their cause. Yui squealed in pain, and when Ruki pulled away to look at his bite marks, Yui pushed him away. Ruki then grabbed her from behind, drinking non-stop until she passed out. Yui appeared in the strange world once again. Seeing the tree before her, she reached out, waking up to some minor pain in her head. After getting up, she went to see the Mukami brothers, fighting over their meal, especially the fried prawns. Yuma wanted equal shares, while Ko argued for first come, first serve, and Azusa would only take what was offered to him. Ruki was the sensible one though. Bringing more prawns to the table, he told them to stop fighting. He then told Yui to eat next, and she complimented his cooking. Seeing how much the brothers interacted with each other, she felt it was a bit more refreshing compared to her time with the Sakamaki family. They needed her to hurry eating, since they had to head to school. However, she wouldn't be going since they couldn't risk the Sakamaki brothers taking her back. And today, Azusa would be staying behind to watch over her. Azusa chuckled slightly, and the way he said it would just be him and Eve made him happy. Well, it was spoken so slowly it was a bit unsettling. Setting down her rosary in her room, she went to look out the window, startled to see Azusa in her room. He told her to come to his room because he wanted to show her something, and inside, he presented his beloved dagger collection. He then wanted to know if she loved him, then asked if she could hit him?
Of course not. I couldn't do that.
Hearing this, he felt bad and was convinced she hated him. However, he didn't hate her, even believing her scent was just like his. In his hand was a knife he just sharpened. He wanted to see it pierce her skin, saying it'd be beautiful. Yui shrank back, begging him to stop, and seeing how much she resisted, he put the dagger in her hand, asking to be cut by her instead. She didn't want to, but her quick hand movement sliced him, making him smile. He remembered his days getting bullied in the slums. His thought process was every time he bled, people were happy. This in turn made him laugh, and he asked the other kids to hit him more, but the kids would call him a freak and leave despite his yearning for more. The pain was his reason to live, his proof he was alive. He enjoyed the pain Yui inflicted on him just now. Even though she was distraught, she tried to run out to get something to treat it. but he pressed her against the wall, telling her there was no need, as he bit into her neck from behind. He described the taste to be velvety and sweet, wanting more and saying she was so fortunate to have such delicious blood. When she began telling him it hurt, he agreed. The greater the pain, the better. He wanted her to feel so much more, since she was his precious Eve. With Yui passing out, Yuma told his brother that was enough, but even so, Azusa wondered if he could truly become Adam with her blood. The days continued to pass at the Mukami estate. Bathing in solemn sadness, Yui reflected on her interaction with Azusa. She still wondered what this Eve business was all about. Yuma then barged in calling her a cow, causing her to shriek so loudly the echo hurt his ears. He then tried to pull her out of the bath because he wanted to take her to see the garden. However, she refused to go until she put on some clothes, leading him to say it wouldn't matter since no one would get aroused by the sight of her body, which she claimed wasn't the point. Outside, she awed at the sight of the tomato garden, all grown by Yuma. Putting the big plump tomatoes in the basket, he explained that if for some reason he and his brothers ever got stuck without food, they could live off of these for a while. Vampires could survive without food, but he liked to eat, and he didn't mind growing them either. The brothers were all originally humans, after all. As they began picking the sprouts out, Yuma started to reminisce on his time living in the slums. He would have happily wolfed down even a single tomato. His time back then was not a happy memory, mostly because all of his friends at the time were killed. If he hadn't met Lucas, he would have been next. Yui wanted to know more details, so he shoved a tomato in her mouth to shut her up. She commented on its delicious taste, making him smile. He then grabbed her and pulled down her shirt for a bite, sucking her blood viciously. She tried to escape, but he quickly caught her, and slamming her against the greenhouse glass, he drank even more. She had no choice but to succumb to his desires. Back in his younger days, Yuma had been beaten so badly, he didn't even know where he was. He wondered if he was going to die in these slums. That was until Lucas, one of the first vampires in the human world, offered his help. Since then, Yuma had been living a much better life. Yui woke up with a minor head pain to the sight of a disgruntled Yuma. He scoffed, calling her hopeless. Then he got up and gave her a sugar cube mouth-to-mouth style, pushing it in to help her recoup. We flash to her in the mysterious room, where she's sitting beside the tree, and a beautiful flower fell into her hand. The Mukami brothers met in the living room, where Yuma, Azusa, and Ruki discussed how they had no signs of awakening, despite all having drunk Eve's blood. Ruki reiterated they must accomplish the Apple of Adam plan for him at any cost. Later, we turn to Yui brushing her hair. She gets a visit from Ko, who, by the way, has been calling her a masochistic kitten the entire time. I just didn't like mentioning it. He presented her a full bouquet of roses as a symbol of their friendship. Wow, so nice. She really enjoyed their beauty and smell, which was why he was ready to ask for something in turn for her gratitude. He pulled her in close, reminding her this was a give-and-take world. But with Yui pushing him off, his tone suddenly became more harsh and brash, exclaiming, "God, what a pain. This is the thanks I get for being nice? So you just take and won't give? Who the hell do you think you are?" He then took the flowers back since she wouldn't give him anything, and tore the petals right out, because the flowers were his, stepping on them as his right. He then grabbed her neck and pushed her onto the ground for a nice thirst-quenching drink, and instantly in love with the taste of her blood. In her ear, he whispered he wouldn't kill her, at least until he became Adam. With Yui fading consciousness, we're back in that empty room. As she watched a petal fall from the tree above, she woke up from her nap on the floor. Heading to the living room, she asked the brothers where Ko was, and they explained he was at work, and wondered if she was concerned about him. She then went to get a glass of water, wondering what his work was. Returning drenched from the rain, Ko was happy to see Yui, telling her to come to his room. He was like a whiny boy, asking her to help him change because he wasn't good with buttons. While she undressed him, she asked what his work was, and that's where we learned he actually works as an idol. Taking off his dress shirt, Yui becomes surprised to see the scars on his back, and with her being so curious, he decided to tell her his tale about a boy who had been alone since birth. Once upon a time, there was a boy who lived in the filthy sewers for as long as he could remember. Having never seen the outside world, there was one thing the boy longed for: It was the small, round sky visible from the manhole. He longed to obtain that bright, beautiful sky. He thought his dream would come true if he could just get outside. Then suddenly, one day, the boy was able to get out. His heart overflowed with hope for this new world. However, he was taken to a certain institution. The place was full of children with no place to go, just like the boy. There, a world more terrifying than the sewers was waiting for the boy. The boy was more beautiful than the other children, so he was given nice clothes and fed good food. But in return, he became the prey of aristocrats who used money as power, and he suffered subhuman treatment. In this world, there are some who think imperfection makes a thing all the more beautiful. Seeing Yui's saddened face, realizing Ko had just told a story about himself, he told her not to be sad. Good things happened too. He has brothers now. Grabbing her arm, he asked Yui to sleep with him, and suddenly pulled her into his bed. We then flashed to the visions of the aristocrats telling the young Ko he could not obtain anything without paying the price, before reaching towards him while he screamed. Yui woke up to Ko's sudden screams in his sleep, begging for it all to stop. She thought to reach out and comfort him, but decided not to. However, Ko had already turned to grab her arm in his sleep. We find Yui staring up at the tree as the petals fall to the sound of a bell ringing. The day had finally come where Ruki presents a school uniform for Yui. She's going to school with him. Now heading to school with the Mukami brothers, Yui is on the lookout for her old housemates. The boys say their goodbyes since none of them have class with her, and walking her way, she suddenly stumbles into Reiji. He had been wondering where she had been, but before Yui could explain herself, he cut her off, saying he didn't have the slightest interest in where she was or who she was with. Laito scared her from behind, calling her a cruel person, questioning if she tossed them aside to have fun with the Mukami brothers. Kanato was unhappy himself, especially since Yui disappeared with guys who weren't real vampires in his eyes. However, with her looking up to ask where Ayato was, the boys were gone in a flash. Elsewhere, Yuma was looking to head up the stairs, annoyed seeing Shuu was obstructing his path by resting. Yuma called Shuu a neat, and told him to get out of his way. However, Shuu responded he can sleep wherever he wants, and if Yuma wanted to pass, he could just pass, only annoying Yuma further. By one of the exits, Yui spotted Ko surrounded by girls. He was quite popular and famous from his idol job. Suddenly though, Subaru pulled her aside, gripping so tight he was hurting her. He had her against the gate, demanding to know if she left by her own free will. However, she didn't answer completely. Ko then appeared, smugly telling Yui to tell Subaru the truth. Ko then mocked Subaru, teasing that he liked her, and telling Subaru that if he wanted her, he should just take her. If not, Ko planned to take her for himself. This prompted Subaru to pull Yui back and immediately drive his fangs into her shoulder. With his knee-jerk reaction to the situation, Subaru realized this was all so stupid. He decided to leave Yui behind, where Ko observed the marks on her neck. His plan was to bite into her so deeply, no one would even be able to tell Subaru had bitten her. Back in Yuma's tomato garden, he decided to ask more about that neat Shuu. Yui described him as a boy who didn't speak much and listened to music most of the time. He also slept a lot back at home. This reaffirmed Yuma's impression of Shuu being a neat. But still, thinking of the eldest Sakamaki brother still pissed him off. While Ruki had been observing the two from a window, he learned from Ko and Azusa that there still had been no sign of an awakening. Ko wondered if despite drinking her blood, not enough time had passed. Ruki accepted that as the answer, and thought back to his younger days, running away with the brothers from pursuers. He and his brothers were beaten and brandished constantly, until one day, their vampire father, Lucas Sakamaki, took them in. Ruki didn't want to disappoint him. On another school day, Yui suddenly tripped, falling backwards from the stairs, where she was safely caught by Yuma. She felt lightheaded and fell into Yuma's chest, so he decided to pick her up. Carrying her their way to class, they stumbled upon a resting Shuu. Yuma demanded Shuu get out of the way, kicking his foot against the wall Shuu rested on. Shuu woke up, casually answering, "You again?" Then, with Yui telling him good morning, he remarked on how he noticed she left, and now took this as her wanting to live with the Mukami brothers. He thought of her as a truly immoral woman. The two vampires started bickering, because Yuma wanted Shuu to move and hated Shuu's rich, aristocratic upbringing. To strike a nerve, Yuma decided to bite Yui's neck in front of Shuu. drinking viciously until Shuu got bothered enough to get up and leave. Yui wondered why Shuu was doing this, but for him, it was a power play to make a point. He wanted to prove not everything went according to the wishes of some big-shot aristocratic brat. Still walking the halls, Shuu suddenly had a flashback to meeting Yuma as a child. Yuma was both nice and polite then, offering Shuu an apple to eat. They were apples Yuma had grown. However, Shuu thought the boy's name was Edgar. Were they really the same boys? From above, Reiji had heard the whole thing, and now wondered how Edgar had become a vampire. Back at the Mukami house, Ruki suddenly pulled a Yui for a drink but stopped himself. His hand was shaking. He looked distraught and turned away where inside his room, he doubted whether or not he and his brothers could become Adam, but then quickly steeled himself, saying they must. It was another dinner where Yuma and Ko were arguing over portions. The brothers wondered what was wrong and why he seemed like he was in such a bad mood lately. This made Yui reflect on how he had grabbed her, yet chosen not to drink her blood at the time. Inside his room, he tossed his book against the wall, frustrated at how everything was going. With Yui getting ready for school, he suddenly grabbed her and pulled her along the halls. Throwing her into a room he demanded she stay in for the time being. Then, he quickly bit her, sapping her blood until she fell over. He himself was still unsettled. Outside the room, he stared at his hand, and his younger brothers asked what was wrong with him. He responded they'd been too lenient lately, and this is how livestock should be treated. From now on, they'd be demanding even more of her blood in order to become Adam. The brothers wondered how long Ruki planned to keep Yui locked in there, since a week had already passed. He simply answered, a prey did not need freedom, and reminded the brothers of the promise they had made with their father. But still, the younger brothers were worried about how weak Yui was becoming. They felt Ruki was behaving unusually hasty. Alone, Ruki slammed the wall out of frustration, then suddenly noticed Ayato standing outside from the window. The brothers could all feel Ayato's immense pressure. The pressure from a true, pure-blooded vampire of a noble family. He got right to where Yui was being kept, scolding her for being nothing but trouble. He immediately took her away before the Mukami brothers could even react. Yuma and Ko were frustrated because Ruki made no attempts to stop Ayato. However, Ruki said there was no need. When Azusa asked him what they were going to do now, all Ruki could think about was his inability to combat Ayato. Outside, Ayato pushed Yui against a tree, ready for a drink. But upon seeing her neck, he noticed the bruises from the intense feeding that had been going on from the past week. He was upset at all the blood she let them take from her. Still, he drank from her anyway, and reminded Yui she belonged to him before drinking even more. He planned to carve it into her body so she'd never forget, as she slowly passed out under the fall of the rain. Back at the Mukami residence, the brothers each sat alone and frustrated in their own rooms, while the tree quickly withered and the gates of the room suddenly stopped. Yui wondered why the tree was dead. Waking up, she was back in her old room, now recounting all of the events from yesterday. Laito was the first to greet her, remarking she looked quite tired from her time with Ayato sucking so much blood from her yesterday. Laito missed her, and just thinking about what they were doing to her back at the Mukami house turned him on. Yeah, this guy is freaky. Pulling the sheets away, she begged him to stop, but nothing was going to stop him from drinking from his favorite spot, her legs. He loved the look on her face. To him, it was irresistible. His plan was to make her feel so good, she'd forget everything. But Reiji stopped Laito's feeding, wanting to gather information. In the living room, he demanded everything she knew about the Mukami brothers. Learning that they'd been calling her Eve made him chuckle a bit, and knowing exactly what they were doing now, he called their plan futile. Kanato then appeared upset, accusing Yui of just coming and going whenever she pleased. He wasn't going to forgive her, even if she cried or begged for it. Subaru was next, asking if she had fun living with them. She tried to answer that she was kidnapped, but he slammed his fist against the wall. Say, is this the exact scene from Season 1? Laito teased Subaru for missing Yui. Then Ayato brought up how he didn't want any of the Mukami brothers' names mentioned in the household. Reiji had called all the brothers to meet, explaining there was a special lunar eclipse coming that occurred simultaneously between both the human and demon worlds. All vampire powers would decrease tremendously during this event. It's something they shouldn't take lightly in case something happens. Later that night, Yui went into Reiji's room, asking about Eve and the mysterious plan the Mukami brothers were trying to enact. Reiji just smirked, saying there was no need for her to know, since the brothers wouldn't be able to carry out their plan to begin with. He then pushed her against a desk, calling her a fool with special blood. He then went for a drink, reminding her of the sweet scent that drove everyone crazy. The idea of the other brothers stealing her blood displeased him greatly. During feeding time for Shuu, he mocked Yui, commenting that as long as she was getting her blood sucked, she didn't care who it was. She squealed he was hurting her, which was of course his intention. Seeing the face she was making, he felt she was practically begging for more. He even started biting into her hand. As the blood dripped from her fingertips, he called her a prey of the finest quality, unwilling to hand her back to the Mukami brothers. There was a depressing air amongst all the brothers in the Mukami household. Ko, Azusa, and Yuma still wondered why Ruki let Yui go without even a fight. He seemed so anxious at the mention of no sign of awakening. They'd never seen their older brother like this. Suddenly, though, demonic wolves broke into the window and the brothers were now surrounded, now becoming the prey. Yui walked towards the withered apple tree, reaching out towards it, when suddenly the sound of a large bell alerted her. The tree then crumbled into a glittering dust before we returned to reality. Still giving a saddened look, Kanato wanted to know what she was thinking about. He then called her a traitor and angrily asked why she left them. He claimed she was his toy, as he decided to go for a drink. He kept drinking until an injured Azusa made his entrance. Azusa explained Ruki was in danger, and Yui tried to go towards him, worried about his injuries. However, Kanato held her back, tightly gripping her hand. He threatened to destroy both her and Azusa here and now. Azusa then begged Yui to come back, making Kanato angrier, shouting at him to get out. Then, seeing Yui still trying to resist, Kanato snapped, really believing the only option was to kill Yui. He started grabbing at her neck, knowing a human life was quite delicate, but he wasn't prepared for Azusa to take his teddy and throw it right in the fire. It burned to a crisp, causing Kanato to scream and run over, watching Teddy burn to his anguish. Distracted with his woes, Azusa was able to get Yui away. Back at the Mukami house though, the entire place was a wreck. She returned to Ruki, injured and bandaged up in bed. Azusa explained it was because Ruki protected them all. When the demon wolves attacked, the brothers tried their best to fend them off, and when Azusa was caught off by himself, Ruki stepped in to take a direct blow. Yui wanted to know why the wolves attacked, but the brothers had no clue either. And outside Ruki's room, they explained their older brother had been acting weird lately. They suspect he'd been under a lot of pressure for their plan to succeed, where one of them would awaken as Adam. They explained the plan in full to her, and surmised Ruki felt pressure since he didn't feel any sign of awakening. They felt bad because it was thanks to Ruki they had good lives now. They had spent their childhoods struggling and enjoyed being together. Yui had been staring outside the window, but now noticed Ruki was waking up. Learning she returned hearing he was injured, he told her it was none of her business. She then brought up the Apple of Adam plan, but he didn't want to hear that from her, and he told Yui to shut up. He accepted his loss, that none of them could become Adam. He was broken because he had been doing all this for Lucas, but no matter how much blood they drank, nothing changed. Ruki reached the conclusion that non-pure bloods could not become Adam. Only pure bloods were given that right. This made Yui remember Reiji's words in regards to this. Ruki and the others had been trying to achieve something that was impossible from the start. He felt ashamed to tell his younger brothers that truth. Yui reasoned with him though, saying it's possible the younger brothers already knew. He'd been struggling on his own because he couldn't become Adam. They all told her about how Ruki always put them first. This caused Ruki to think back to spending time with his brothers in their youth. He was shocked, being cheered up to what he still called livestock. He didn't quite understand Yui, but he now knew he wanted her as his and his alone, and telling her to stay with him, he began to drink softly as he held her. Elsewhere, the brothers Shin and Carlo released the wolves again. With the lunar eclipse encroaching, vampires were at their weakest, while these two at the founder level were at their strongest. Their goal was to claim Yui's blood. The wolves were on the attack at the Sakamaki residence, and one was diving right at Ayato. After dealing with the wolves tearing up the place, Ayato wondered what the deal was. Both Reiji and Shuu concluded that with their attack on them during the lunar eclipse, that this was probably related to the remaining survivors of the founders. The wolves had retreated without finishing them off, and that's when they figured Yui was their next target. Despite Shuu warning Ayato that the founders are at maximum strength during lunar eclipses, he decided to head out anyway. He wasn't going to let them have Yui. She was actually in the middle of bringing Ruki some water when Ayato suddenly appeared behind her. Ayato explained what was going on in regards to the founders hunting after Yui, and they'd for sure make their entrance themselves once the eclipse hit its peak. So, Ruki proposed to work together with Ayato to protect Yui. Ayato was fine with it, but taking a bite right out of her, he had to remind them she was his. Ruki wasn't going to back down though, uttering she was his one and only Eve before also taking a bite. They were both feasting on her blood. But was this really the appropriate time with them about to be under attack? Watching the moon as it slowly hit its eclipse, Ruki mentioned Yui was just like how he used to be. Freedom taken away, imprisoned, perpetually suffering, but it wasn't going to be that way anymore. He believed now they could only truly become Adam when Eve had free will and free choice. That's why earlier, he asked if Yui wanted their protection. He wanted her opinion, so he could be freely chosen as Adam by Eve. Wow, finally someone is willing to give Yui some free choice. Will they save her though? This was released back in 2015, so we'll probably never know with another season. But instead, you could try finding the answer by playing the ultimate game. Subscribe to the channel for more. Also, watch this next video.
Hey guys, it's me, Kimmy.
And ComfyTea.
We will see you all in the next one.